Eleanor Morgan's knees hit the frozen boardwalk and she couldn't get up. Not this time. Her empty basket rolled into the mud. 5-year-old Grace stood shivering beside her, too weak to cry anymore. 4 days without food. Her daughter's lips were turning blue, and the whole town of Bitter Creek just watched. That's when she heard boots crunching through the snow. Heavy, deliberate, coming straight toward her. A man's voice, low and rough. "Ma'am, can you stand? Stay until the end to see what happens next. Subscribe and comment your city below so I can see how far this story travels." Eleanor had lied to Grace that morning. She'd said they were going for a walk. Said they'd have breakfast after something warm, something good. She'd said it bright and cheerful the way mothers do when they're pretending the world isn't ending. Grace believed her. Children believe their mothers. And that faith cut deeper than any knife. Now Eleanor knelt in the frozen mud outside Shaw's general store, her legs refusing to work. Her pride scattered somewhere with that empty basket. 4 days since she'd eaten anything solid. 4 days of giving every scrap to Grace. 4 days of watching her daughter fade like a candle in the wind. "Mama?" Grace's voice was barely a whisper. "Mama, get up. I'm trying, baby." She wasn't trying. She couldn't. Her body had finally quit on her the way everything else had quit on her since Thomas died in that God-forsaken mine 2 years ago. The store door opened behind her. "Well, well." Cornelia Shaw's voice slithered out like something cold and wet. "Still here. Mrs. Morgan thought I made myself clear." Eleanor forced her head up. The store owner stood in the doorway, arms crossed over his expensive vest, a wad of tobacco bulging in his cheek. He was a big man, soft in the middle, but hard everywhere else. The kind of man who smiled while he crushed you. "Please." The word scraped her throat raw. "Mr. Shaw, I'm not asking for charity. I have skills. I can sew. I can teach. You can what?" He spat tobacco juice into the snow close enough to splatter her worn dress. "Work a widow with a sickly child. Nobody wants that kind of trouble." "She's not sickly." Eleanor's voice cracked. "She's hungry." "Same difference out here." Grace pressed against Eleanor's side, trembling. Her small fingers found her mother's sleeve and held tight. So tight. "My husband died working the mines that built this town." Eleanor heard her own voice rising, couldn't stop it. 2 years he broke his back pulling gold out of the ground. 2 years, and he's been dead for 2 more. Doesn't that count for anything? Shaw's eyes were stones. His debts didn't die with him. He smiled, showing tobacco-stained teeth. "You owe me $43, Mrs. Morgan. Until I see payment, you don't see a single bean from my store. I don't owe you $43. The original debt was $12. Interest." His smile widened. "It accumulates." "That's not you can't. I can do whatever I want." Shaw stepped forward, and Eleanor flinched back despite herself. "This is my store, my town. You don't like it." He gestured toward the empty white horizon, the endless nothing stretching in every direction. "Road's right there." Grace tugged at Eleanor's sleeve. "Mama, I'm cold." "I know, baby. I know." "Can we go home?" Home. A cabin with gaps in the walls wide enough to stick your hand through. A fireplace with barely enough wood to last the week. An empty pantry that mocked her every time she opened it. A roof that leaked snow onto the bed where she held her daughter at night and prayed for something, anything to change. "Soon," Eleanor whispered. "Soon." "Get her out of here." Shaw's voice hardened. "You're scaring off my customers." Eleanor looked past him into the store. Faces appeared in the window. Women she'd once called neighbors. Men who'd tipped their hats when Thomas was alive. Mrs. Hartley, who'd borrowed sugar from Eleanor just last winter. Mr. Peterson, whose son had played with Grace before everything fell apart. They stared at her like she was entertainment. Not one of them moved. "What customers?" Eleanor heard herself say. The ones watching through the window like we're a circus show. Something ugly flashed across Shaw's face. He stepped closer, close enough that she could smell the tobacco and whiskey on his breath. "You got a mouth on you, widow." His voice dropped low, meant only for her. "That mouth's gonna get you in trouble one day." "I'm already in trouble. Couldn't get much worse." "Oh, it can always get worse." Shaw crouched down, bringing his face level with hers. "I made you an offer 6 months ago. A warm bed, food for your girl, security, everything a woman in your position needs." His eyes crawled over her in a way that made her skin try to leave her body. "You remember what you said?" Eleanor's stomach turned. "I remember." "I'd rather starve," you said. Shaw straightened up, spreading his hands wide like a preacher delivering a sermon. "Well, Mrs. Morgan, looks like you got your wish." He turned and walked back inside. The door closed with a solid thunk. Eleanor stayed on her knees, the cold seeping through her threadbare dress, her daughter's hand still clutching her sleeve. Above them, the sky was the color of old iron, heavy with the promise of more snow. "Mama," Grace's voice was so small. "Why are they so mean?" "I don't know, baby." "Did we do something bad?" "No." Eleanor pulled Grace close, wrapping her arms around the small, shivering body. "No, sweetheart. We didn't do anything bad." "Then why won't they help us?" Eleanor didn't have an answer. She'd been asking herself the same question for 2 years. The door opened again. Eleanor's spine stiffened, expecting more cruelty, more judgment, more of the small-town poison that had become her daily bread. "Pathetic," a woman's voice said. Mrs. Hartley Eleanor recognized, the one who'd borrowed sugar. "Absolutely pathetic." "Should have taken Shaw's offer when she had the chance," another voice agreed. "Mr. Peterson." "Now look at her. Her husband was no good anyway. Everyone knew it. And the child, that poor child with a mother like that." Eleanor closed her eyes, willed herself to disappear, willed the ground to open up and swallow her whole. Then she heard something else. Boots on the boardwalk. Not the casual shuffle of townspeople going about their business. These steps were different, heavy, deliberate, purposeful, coming straight toward her. "Ma'am?" The voice was low, quiet, not demanding, not pitying, just there. Eleanor turned her head. The man stood at the edge of the boardwalk, tall and broad-shouldered, his canvas coat dusted with snow. Dark hair curled from beneath a weathered hat, and his face was all hard angles and shadow like someone had carved it from mountain rock. A scar ran from his left cheekbone down to his jaw, white against sun-darkened skin. But his eyes, brown, deep, steady, held no judgment. No pity either. Just a calm attention that somehow made her feel seen for the first time in years. "Can you stand?" he asked. Eleanor's voice failed. She tried again. "I don't know." The man stepped forward and crouched beside her, his movements slow and careful, like he was approaching a wounded animal. Up close, she could see the silver threads in his dark hair, the weathered lines around his eyes, the way his hands, calloused, scarred, work-worn, rested easy on his knees. He looked like someone who'd seen hard times and come out the other side. "Here." He offered his hand, palm up. "Take it slow." Eleanor stared at his hand, the hand of a man who'd never been afraid of labor. "Why?" The word came out sharp, suspicious. 2 years of cruelty had taught her to question everything. "Why would you help me?" "Because you need help." He said it simply, like it was obvious, like kindness was still something that existed in the world. "You don't know me." "Don't have to. I can't pay you." "Didn't ask for payment." Eleanor's eyes burned. She blinked hard, refusing to cry in front of this stranger, in front of the whole damn town, still watching through Shaw's window. Grace tugged at her sleeve. "Mama, he seems nice." The man's gaze shifted to Grace, and something in his expression changed, softened. Just slightly. Just enough. What's your name, little one? Grace pressed closer to Eleanor, suddenly shy. Grace? That's a real pretty name. His voice gentled in a way that made Eleanor's chest ache. I'm Jackson. Most folks call me Jack. He looked back at Eleanor, and she saw something flicker in those steady brown eyes. Recognition, maybe. Like he knew what it felt like to be on your knees with nowhere left to fall. Storm's coming in fast, he said. Hour, maybe 2. Temperature's gonna drop hard. You don't want to be caught out in it. Eleanor followed his gaze toward the horizon. The clouds had thickened, while she'd been kneeling here darker now, more menacing. The wind was picking up, cutting through her thin shawl like it wasn't there. Our cabin's 4 miles south, she said. I don't know if I can walk it. Then don't walk it. Jack stood and gestured toward the end of the street where a big gray horse stood tethered to a post, a canvas-covered wagon behind it. I got a wagon. I'll take you. Eleanor's heart hammered against her ribs. Every warning her mother had ever given her about strange men screamed through her skull. But louder still was Grace's small body shivering against hers. Grace's hollow cheeks. Grace's blue-tinged lips. Why? She asked again. You don't know me. You don't owe me anything. Why would you? Ma'am. Jack's voice was patient but firm. We can stand here debating my motives while your little girl freezes, or we can get moving. He held out his hand again. Your choice. Grace looked up at Eleanor with huge eyes, the same green as her father's had been. Mama, she whispered. I'm really cold. Eleanor closed her eyes, drew a breath, made a decision. All right. She took his hand. His grip was strong and steady as he helped her to her feet. Her legs wobbled weak from hunger and cold, but he didn't rush her. Just waited solid and patient until she found her balance. Can you walk to the wagon? Yes. Eleanor wasn't sure it was true, but she'd make it true. She'd crawl if she had to. She bent to pick up her empty basket, the motion automatic pointless, and took Grace's hand. Together they walked toward the wagon, Jack matching his pace to hers. Behind them, Eleanor heard the store door open. That's it, widow. Shaw's voice carried across the street loud enough for everyone to hear. Get in the wagon with some stranger. Show the whole town what kind of woman you really are. Eleanor's steps faltered. Heat flooded her face. Jack stopped walking, turned slowly. His expression hadn't changed, but something in his posture shifted. A stillness that felt dangerous. You got something to say to me? His voice was quiet, but it carried. Shaw's smirk wavered. I'm just saying a respectable woman wouldn't what? Jack stepped forward. Wouldn't accept help when she's starving. Wouldn't try to keep her child alive. That what you're saying? Now hold on. No, you hold on. Jack moved closer, and Eleanor saw Shaw take a step back. The big man who'd lorded over this town for years backing away from a stranger in a dusty coat. I watched through that window, Jack said. Saw you turn her away. Saw you spit at her feet. Saw you make a hungry woman beg while her little girl watched. His voice dropped lower, harder. What kind of man does that? She owes me money. She owes you nothing. Jack's eyes never left Shaw's face. Whatever debt you're claiming, it ain't worth a child's life. And if you were any kind of Christian, any kind of man at all, you'd know that. Shaw's face had gone red then white. His hand moved toward his coat, toward what Eleanor knew was a pistol he kept there. Jack didn't move, didn't flinch, just watched with those steady brown eyes, like he'd seen men reach for guns before, and wasn't particularly impressed. Go ahead, Jack said calmly. Draw. See what happens. The street had gone silent. Everyone was watching now from the windows, from the boardwalk, from the alley between buildings. The whole town holding its breath. Shaw's hand stopped. Dropped. This ain't over, he said, but his voice had lost its swagger. You're making enemies here, stranger. Wouldn't be the first time. Jack turned his back on Shaw, deliberate dismissive, and walked back to Eleanor. His hand touched her elbow, gentle but firm. Let's go. They walked to the wagon. Eleanor felt the eyes on her back like brands, felt the whispers starting, felt the judgment spreading through the town like poison. But she kept walking, kept holding Grace's hand, kept moving forward, because it was the only direction left. Jack helped them into the wagon, lifting Grace first, with surprising gentleness, then offering Eleanor his hand for the step up. The wagon bed was half filled with supplies, sacks of flour, canned goods, blankets, tools, more food than Eleanor had seen in months. You a trader? She asked, settling Grace beside her. Of sorts. Jack climbed onto the driver's bench and took up the reins. Do some trapping, some horsework, move around. A drifter, Eleanor thought. No roots, no ties, no reason to stay. Where's your cabin? He asked. South road along the creek, about 4 miles, maybe 5. He clicked his tongue and the horse started moving. The wagon creaked forward, leaving Bitter Creek behind them, leaving the staring eyes and the whispered judgments and the closed doors. Eleanor sat rigid on the bench, Grace pressed against her side. Her body ached, her stomach cramped with hunger, but her mind was racing. You didn't have to do that, she said finally. Back there with Shaw. Man like that needs standing up to. He's dangerous. He owns half this town. So I gathered. Jack kept his eyes on the road. How long's he been after you? Eleanor's face heated. How did you... Way he looked at you, way he talked. That wasn't just about money. Jack's jaw tightened. He made you an offer, didn't he? Eleanor was quiet for a long moment. The wagon wheels crunched through the snow. Grace had gone still against her side, listening, even though Eleanor wished she wasn't. 6 months ago, Eleanor said finally, her voice barely audible. When I came to him for credit, he said he'd wipe my debt, set me up proper. If I... She couldn't finish. And you told him no. I told him I'd rather starve. Good. Eleanor stared at him. Good, Mr. Holloway, if I'd said yes, Grace would have food right now, a warm bed. She wouldn't be... She'd have a mother who sold herself for a meal. Jack's voice was quiet but firm. That ain't something a child forgets, and it ain't something you come back from. Eleanor's throat closed up. She looked away, watching the snowy landscape roll by, fighting the tears she'd been holding back all morning. I'm not a bad woman, she whispered. I know. I've tried everything. I've worked until my hands bled. I've begged. I've bartered. I've done everything except... Her voice broke. I just wanted to keep her alive, that's all. Just keep her alive. Grace stirred against her side, half asleep from the motion of the wagon and the warmth of the blanket Jack had passed back to them. Mama! The small voice was drowsy. Are we going home? Yes, baby. Eleanor stroked her daughter's thin hair. We're going home. Is the nice man coming with us? Eleanor looked at Jack, at the back of his head, at the broad shoulders, at the steady hands holding the reins. I don't know. Jack turned slightly. I'll see you home safe. Make sure you got what you need to weather the storm. And then I move on. His voice was matter-of-fact. It's what I do. Of course it was. Eleanor had known it the moment she saw him. Men like that didn't stay. They rode through, did their good deeds, and disappeared into the horizon like they'd never existed. But right now, with her daughter warm beside her, and food in the wagon, and the promise of shelter ahead, Eleanor couldn't find it in herself to be disappointed. Right now, she was just grateful. Mr. Holloway, she said. Jack. Jack. The name felt strange on her tongue. Thank you, for what you did back there, for this. I don't know how to... Don't need thanks. He glanced back at her just for a moment, and she saw something in his eyes, something old and sad and knowing. Just need to know you'll be all right. We'll be all right. Eleanor said it firmly, like saying it could make it true. We always are. Jack nodded and turned back to the road. They rode in silence as the snow began to fall. The cabin came into view as the last light faded from the sky, and Eleanor felt the familiar shame crawl up her spine. It was worse than she remembered. Or maybe she'd just stopped seeing it clearly the way you stop seeing your own face in the mirror. The roof sagged in the middle. The walls had gaps wide enough to see daylight through. The porch had partially collapsed, and the chimney tilted at an angle that suggested it might fall over in a strong wind. This was what she'd been fighting to keep. This ruin. This monument to everything that had gone wrong. Jack pulled the wagon to a stop and sat looking at the structure for a long moment. Eleanor watched his profile, waiting for the judgment, the pity, the poorly hidden contempt. Needs work, he said finally. I know. Roof won't make it through another storm. I know. Walls aren't keeping out much of anything. I know. Eleanor's voice cracked. I know all of it, Mr. Holloway. I'm not blind, but it's what I have, and I wasn't criticizing. Jack turned to look at her, his expression unreadable. Just figuring out what needs doing. Eleanor stared at him. What? Storm's coming. Can't leave you here with a roof like that. He climbed down from the wagon and started unhitching the horse. I'll do what I can tonight, shore up the worst of it. Make sure you and the girl don't freeze. You? Eleanor struggled for words. You can't, you don't have to. No, I don't have to. Jack led the horse toward the remnants of the barn. Doing it anyway. Grace tugged at Eleanor's sleeve. Mama, can I help? No, baby. You need to rest. But I want to help the nice man. Jack paused, looking back at them. Something flickered across his face, that softening again, that crack in the stone. Tell you what, little one. You go inside with your mama, get warm, and later you can help me name my horse. Deal. Grace's eyes went wide. He doesn't have a name? Not yet. Been waiting for the right person to help me pick one. Really? Really? Grace looked up at Eleanor with naked hope on her thin face. Can I, Mama? Can I name his horse? Eleanor's chest ached with love and fear, and something that felt dangerously like hope. We'll see, she managed. Let's get inside first. She carried Grace to the cabin, navigating the broken porch steps by memory. The door stuck swollen from cold, and she had to shoulder it open. Inside was dark and cold and smelled of damp wood and desperation. The fireplace held nothing but ash. The table was empty. The shelves were bare. This was her life. This was what she'd been fighting to survive. Eleanor set Grace on the bed and wrapped her in the one blanket that wasn't falling apart. I'm going to start a fire, she said. Stay here, baby. Stay warm. Mama. Yes. Grace's small face was serious in the dim light. I like him. The nice man. Eleanor's throat tightened. I know you do. He's not like the other people, the mean ones. No. Eleanor bent to kiss her daughter's forehead. No, he's not? She was trying to coax a flame from the meager kindling when Jack appeared in the doorway, his arms full of wood. Got some from my wagon, he said, crossing to the fireplace. You can use your stores for later. That's your wood. Got plenty. He knelt beside her and began building the fire with practiced efficiency. You're shaking. I'm cold. You're starving. He struck the flint, caught a spark, nursed it into flame. When's the last time you ate? Really ate? Eleanor was quiet. That long. She stopped. Swallowed. Grace had some broth 2 days ago. I found some bones behind the butcher's, boiled them up. Jack's hands stilled on the kindling. What about you? I wasn't hungry. Don't lie to me. Eleanor's eyes snapped to his face. His expression hadn't changed, but something in his voice had shifted. I'm not. You gave your food to your daughter. It wasn't a question. All of it. Everything you had. You've been starving yourself to keep her alive. Eleanor couldn't speak, couldn't look at him, couldn't do anything but stare at the growing fire and feel the shame burning hotter than the flames. "That's what mothers do," she whispered finally. "We keep our children alive, whatever it takes." Jack was quiet for a long moment. Then he stood and went back to the wagon. When he returned, he was carrying a sack that he set on the table. Flour, beans, salt pork, canned peaches. He pulled items out as he named them. Coffee, sugar, cornmeal. Eleanor stared at the growing pile. More food than she'd seen in months. More food than she could afford in a year. "I can't accept, not asking you to accept." Jack's voice was firm. "I'm telling you to eat." He found a pot, poured beans into it, added water from his canteen. "Both of you. Tonight. And tomorrow. And however long it takes." "Mr. Holloway." "Jack." "Jack." Eleanor stood, her legs still unsteady. "Why are you doing this? And don't say because I need help. That's not an answer. People need help all the time. Nobody helps them." Jack set the pot near the fire and straightened slowly. He was taller than she'd realized, tall enough that she had to look up to meet his eyes. "When I was 8 years old," he said, "my father died in a mining accident. Left my mother with 4 children and nothing else. We damn near starved that first winter." Eleanor went still. "A man came through our town," Jack continued. "Foreman from a ranch down south. He saw my mother sitting outside the church, too proud to beg, but too desperate to walk away. He didn't ask questions, didn't judge, just offered to take me on as a stable boy, room and board and wages sent home to my mother." "Did you go?" "I was 8 years old, didn't want to leave, cried for a week." Jack's jaw tightened with old memory. "But that man's offer was the only thing that saved my family. My mother got back on her feet. My sisters survived. And I learned something I never forgot." "What?" "That sometimes a stranger's kindness is the only thing standing between life and death." His eyes held hers, dark and steady, and full of something she couldn't name. "I watched that foreman treat my mother like a person, not a burden, like helping her was just the natural thing to do." He paused. "I swore I'd be that person for someone else someday." Eleanor's vision blurred. She blinked hard, but the tears came anyway, sliding down her cheeks. "I'm sorry," she whispered. I'm not usually like this." "You're exhausted. You're starving. You've been carrying everything alone for 2 years." Jack's voice gentled. "Nobody can do that forever. Not even you." Eleanor laughed, a broken, desperate sound. "You don't know me. You don't know what I can do." "I know what I see." Jack moved to check the beans, his back to her. A woman who'd rather starve than sell herself. A mother who gives her food to her child. A person who keeps fighting even when there's nothing left to fight with. He glanced over his shoulder. "That's pretty impressive in my experience." "It doesn't feel impressive. It feels like failing." "That's because you're doing it alone." He turned to face her fully. "Nobody's meant to survive alone. Not out here. Not anywhere." Eleanor wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "My husband used to say that. He said the frontier was built by communities, not individuals. We rise together or fall alone, he'd say. Smart man." "He was." Eleanor's voice softened with memory. "Thomas was the smartest man I ever knew. Kind, too. He'd give his last dollar to a stranger, share his last meal with someone hungrier." "What happened to him?" "Mining accident. Cave-in." Eleanor stared into the fire. "They said it was quick. They said he didn't suffer." Her voice hardened. "They said a lot of things that were supposed to make it easier. None of them did." Jack was quiet. The fire crackled. Outside, the wind was picking up, howling around the corners of the cabin. "I lost someone too," he said finally. Wife and son. Fever took them while I was away on a job. By the time I got home—" He stopped. His jaw worked. "By the time I got home, they'd been in the ground 3 days. Eleanor's heart clenched. "I'm so sorry. It was 6 years ago. Feels like yesterday." Jack's voice was rough. "I buried them on a hill overlooking a valley. Prettiest spot I could find. Then I got on my horse and rode. Didn't stop riding for a long time." "Where did you go?" "Everywhere. Nowhere." He shrugged. "Worked ranches, hunted, trapped. Took any job that kept me moving, kept me tired enough to sleep without dreaming." "Did it work?" "No." His laugh was hollow. "But I kept doing it anyway, because I didn't know what else to do." Eleanor moved toward him without thinking. Her hand found his arm just briefly, just enough to say, "I understand," without words. Jack looked at her. Something flickered in his eyes. Surprise, gratitude, something else she couldn't name. "You're the first person I've told about them," he said quietly. "In 6 years." "Why me?" "I don't know." He looked at her hand on his arm but didn't pull away. "Maybe because you know what it's like. To lose someone. To keep going when everything in you wants to stop." He paused. "Maybe we recognize each other." Eleanor's voice was barely a whisper. "The walking wounded." "Yeah." His hand came up to cover hers, just for a moment. "Something like that." They stood there in the flickering firelight, two broken people recognizing the shape of each other's scars. Then Grace's voice came from the bed, sleepy and small. "Mama, is the food ready?" Eleanor pulled back, suddenly aware of how close they'd been standing. "Almost, baby." Her voice wasn't quite steady. "Almost." Jack turned away, checking the beans, his shoulders tense. "Should be ready soon," he said. "Get her to the table." Eleanor did. She helped Grace onto the bench, tucked a blanket around her thin shoulders, tried not to think about the way Jack's hand had felt on hers. Tried not to think about how long it had been since anyone had touched her with kindness. The beans were simple, just beans and salt pork and water, but Grace ate like it was a feast. Her small hands clutched the spoon, her eyes wide with wonder at each bite. "It's so good," she breathed. "Mama, it's so good." "Eat slow, little one." Jack's voice was gentle. "Your belly ain't used to food right now. Small bites." Grace nodded solemnly and slowed down, but her eyes never left the bowl. Eleanor tried to eat, but her throat was tight. She watched her daughter instead, watched the color come back into those hollow cheeks, watched the light return to those green eyes. This was what she'd been fighting for, this moment, this simple miracle of her child eating a meal. "Thank you," she said to Jack, her voice rough. "I don't know how I'll ever eat." He pushed her bowl toward her. "Thank me by eating." So she did. And the beans tasted like salvation. Later, after Grace had fallen asleep in the bed with a full belly for the first time in weeks, Eleanor sat by the fire and watched Jack work. He'd found her husband's old tools in the shed, rusty but usable, and was reinforcing the walls, stuffing rags and old newspaper into the gaps, nailing boards over the worst of the holes. "You should sleep," he said without turning around. "I'll keep the fire going." "I can't sleep." "Try." Eleanor stopped, started again. "I'm afraid if I close my eyes, I'll wake up, and this will all have been a dream. You'll be gone. The food will be gone. And we'll be right back where we started." Jack set down his hammer, turned to face her. "I'll be here in the morning." "You said you move on. You said it's what you do." "I did." He crossed to her, crouched down so they were eye level. "But I also said I'd see you safe. Make sure you've got what you need." His eyes held hers. "Storm's coming. Big one from the looks of it. Might be days before it passes." Eleanor's breath caught. "Days." "Could be. And your roof ain't ready for it." Jack glanced toward the sagging structure above them. "I'm staying until it is. Until I know you and Grace won't freeze." And then, Jack was quiet for a long moment. The fire crackled between them. "And then we'll see," he said finally. "That's all I can promise right now. That we'll see." It wasn't enough. It wasn't nearly enough. But it was more than anyone had given her in 2 years. "All right," Eleanor whispered. "We'll see." Jack nodded and stood. "Get some sleep. Tomorrow's going to be a long day." He went back to his work, and Eleanor lay down beside her daughter, pulling the new blanket over them both. Grace stirred, mumbling something in her sleep, and curled closer. Eleanor closed her eyes. Outside, the wind howled and the snow fell, and a storm began to build on the horizon. But inside, for the first time in longer than she could remember, Eleanor Morgan felt something other than despair. She felt hope, and that was the most dangerous thing of all. The storm hit before dawn. Eleanor woke to the sound of wind screaming against the walls to the cabin, shaking like something alive was trying to tear it apart. She sat up fast, heart pounding, reaching for Grace in the darkness. "Mama!" Grace's voice was small and scared. "What's happening?" "It's just a storm, baby. Just a storm." But it wasn't just a storm. Eleanor had lived through Montana winters for 4 years. She knew the difference between weather and death. This was death howling at her door. "Stay here." Eleanor threw off the blanket. "Don't move." She stumbled toward the fireplace, but it had burned down to embers. The cold was already seeping in thick and heavy, turning her breath to fog. "Jack!" she called into the darkness. "Jack!" No answer. Her stomach dropped. He'd left. Of course he'd left. She'd been a fool to think. The door burst open. Jack came through in a blast of snow and wind, his arms full of wood, his face raw from the cold. He kicked the door shut behind him and dropped the wood by the fireplace. "Thought you might need this," he said, like he hadn't just walked through a blizzard. Eleanor's legs went weak with relief. "I thought you were gone." "Said I'd be here in the morning." He knelt by the fireplace, building up the fire with quick, efficient movements. "It's morning. It's barely morning enough." The fire caught flames leaping up, pushing back the darkness. Jack stood and turned to face her. "Roof held through the night, should hold through the storm long as we keep the weight off." "The weight?" "Snow. Gonna pile up fast." He moved toward the door. "I need to get up there, knock it off before it caves in." "In this?" Eleanor grabbed his arm. "You'll die out there." "I'll be careful." "Jack." "Eleanor." His voice was firm but gentle. "If that roof comes down, we all die. This is the only way." She stared at him, this stranger who'd appeared out of nowhere and was now risking his life for her, for Grace, for a broken-down cabin that wasn't even his. "Why?" The word came out raw. "Why are you doing this?" Jack looked at her for a long moment. Then he reached up and touched her face just briefly, just his fingertips against her cheek. "Because I finally found something worth staying for." Then he was gone out into the storm, and Eleanor was left standing there with her heart pounding and her face burning where he'd touched her. "Mama!" Grace appeared at her side, wrapped in the blanket, her eyes wide. "Is Jack going to be okay?" Eleanor pulled her daughter close. "Yes, baby, he's going to be okay." She prayed she wasn't lying. The next hours were the longest of Eleanor's life. She kept the fire burning. She kept Grace fed and warm. She listened to Jack's boots on the roof, to the scrape of his shovel, to the howling wind that never stopped. Every few minutes, she'd hear a thump, snow sliding off, hitting the ground, and she'd breathe again. Then silence. Then more scraping. Then another thump. It went on for hours. 3, 4, 5. Eleanor lost count. She just listened, her whole body tense, waiting for the sound that meant he'd fallen. That meant the roof had given way. That meant she was alone again. It never came. Finally, the door opened, and Jack stumbled inside. He was covered in snow, his face gray with exhaustion, his hands shaking so badly he couldn't unfasten his coat. Eleanor rushed to him, pulling at the frozen buttons, stripping off the soaked canvas. "You're freezing," she said. "You're God. Jack, you're half dead." "I'm fine." "You're not fine. Sit down, sit down." She pushed him toward the fire, wrapped him in blankets, pressed a cup of hot coffee into his trembling hands. "Drink," she ordered. "Drink it all." He drank. Eleanor watched the color slowly return to his face, watched his breathing even out, watched the shaking subside. "Roof's clear," he said finally. "Should hold now. You could have died." "Didn't." "Jack." "Eleanor." He looked up at her, and something in his eyes made her stop. "I've been dead for 6 years. Walking around breathing, but dead. This—" He gestured vaguely at the cabin at Grace, asleep by the fire at her. "This is the first time I've felt alive since Sarah and William. So if I had to freeze my hands off to keep you safe, it was worth it." Eleanor's throat closed up. She sank down beside him, not trusting her legs. "You can't say things like that." "Why not?" "Because I might believe them." "Good." Jack set down the coffee cup. His hand found hers. "Believe them." They sat like that, hands intertwined, while the storm raged outside, and Grace slept peacefully by the fire. Eleanor should have pulled away, should have reminded herself that he was a stranger, that he'd be gone as soon as the storm passed, that she couldn't afford to feel whatever was growing in her chest. She didn't pull away. The storm lasted 5 days. 5 days of wind and snow and cold that seeped into your bones. 5 days of Jack keeping the fire burning and the roof clear. 5 days of Eleanor cooking what they had, stretching it further than she'd thought possible. 5 days of talking. They talked about everything. About Thomas and Sarah and the people they'd lost. About Grace and William and the children they'd loved. About the lives they'd planned and the futures that had been stolen from them. Eleanor learned that Jack had grown up in Texas, the oldest of 4, raised by a mother who'd worked herself to the bone to keep them fed. She learned that he'd fought in the war, wouldn't say which side, said it didn't matter anymore, and that he'd seen things that still haunted his dreams. She learned that he laughed when Grace told him jokes, even the ones that didn't make sense. She learned that he whistled while he worked old songs she didn't recognize. She learned that he looked at her sometimes like she was something precious, something worth protecting. And she learned that she was falling for him. It was stupid. It was dangerous. It was the last thing she needed. But she couldn't stop it any more than she could stop the storm. On the 3rd night, Grace fell asleep early, exhausted from a day of helping Jack patch the walls. Eleanor sat by the fire mending a tear in one of Jack's shirts when he came to sit beside her. "You don't have to do that." "I want to." She kept her eyes on her work. "You've done so much for us. Let me do this." Jack was quiet for a moment. "Eleanor." Look at me." She looked up. He was closer than she'd realized, close enough that she could see the firelight reflected in his eyes, close enough that she could smell the soap he'd used to wash his hands. "I need to tell you something," he said. Eleanor's heart stuttered. "What?" "When this storm breaks—" He stopped, started again. "When this storm breaks, I'm supposed to move on. That's what I do. That's what I've always done." "I know. But I don't want to." Eleanor's breath caught. "What?" "I don't want to leave." Jack's voice was rough. "I want to stay. Here. With you and Grace. I want to help you rebuild this place. Build it into something real. I want to—" He broke off, shaking his head. "God, I'm no good at this." "No good at what?" "At saying what I feel." He laughed, a harsh sound. "I've spent 6 years not feeling anything. Now I feel everything, and I don't know what to do with it." Eleanor set down her mending. Her hands were shaking. "Jack, I know it's fast. I know we barely know each other. I know you've got no reason to trust me, Jack. And I know I've got nothing to offer. No money, no land, no prospects. Just a horse and a rifle, and a past I can't outrun. Jack." Eleanor reached up and put her hand over his mouth. "Stop talking." He stopped. "I don't care about money or land or prospects." Her voice was barely a whisper. "I care about the man who carried my daughter out of the snow. I care about the man who stood up to Shaw when no one else would. I care about the man who spent 5 days keeping us alive when he could have left any time." She dropped her hand. "I care about you." Jack stared at her. Then he reached up, cupped her face in his hands, and kissed her. It was soft at first, tentative. Two people who'd forgotten how to hope remembering together. Then Eleanor's hands found his shoulders, and Jack pulled her closer, and the kiss deepened into something that felt like coming home. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Jack rested his forehead against hers. "I'm going to stay," he said. "If you'll have me." "I'll have you." Eleanor laughed, the sound thick with tears. "God help me, I'll have you." Grace's voice came from the bed, sleepy and amused. "Does this mean Jack's going to be my papa?" Eleanor and Jack both froze. "We thought you were asleep," Eleanor said. "I woke up." Grace sat up, her eyes bright even in the dim light. Does it mean he's going to be my papa?" Eleanor looked at Jack. He looked back at her, and something passed between them. An understanding. A decision. "Would you like that?" Jack asked Grace. "Would you like me to be your papa?" Grace's face split into the biggest smile Eleanor had seen since Thomas died. "Yes," she said. "Yes, yes, yes." She launched herself off the bed and threw her arms around Jack's neck. He caught her, lifting her up, holding her close. Eleanor watched them, her heart so full it hurt. For the first time in 2 years, she let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, everything was going to be all right. The storm broke on the 6th day. Eleanor woke to silence, real silence, not the howling void that had become normal. She sat up slowly, blinking in the pale light that filtered through the gaps in the walls. The gaps that Jack had spent 5 days filling. She looked at the cabin with new eyes. It wasn't perfect, far from it, but it was better, warmer, stronger. The roof had held, the walls were solid, the fireplace burned steady. Jack had done that. In 5 days, with nothing but old tools and sheer determination, he'd turned her crumbling shelter into something that might actually survive the winter. Morning. Jack appeared in the doorway, stamping snow from his boots. Storms passed. Roads should be clear by afternoon. Eleanor's stomach dropped. "You're leaving." "What?" Jack looked at her, confused. Then his face softened. No, Eleanor. I told you I'm staying." "But you said—" "I said roads should be clear." He crossed to her, took her hands. "So I can ride into town, get more supplies, start setting things up proper." "You're going into town after what happened with Shaw. Have to face him sometime." Jack's jaw tightened. "Might as well be now." "Jack, he's dangerous. He'll what?" Jack's voice was steady. "Shoot me in the street, in front of the whole town." He shook his head. "Shaw's a coward. He preys on people who can't fight back. The moment someone stands up to him, he folds." "You don't know that." "I know men like him." Jack squeezed her hands. "I've been dealing with men like him my whole life. Trust me." Eleanor wanted to argue, wanted to beg him to stay, to hide, to never go near that town again. But she looked at his face, at the determination there, the quiet strength, and she knew he was right. They couldn't hide forever. Couldn't let Shaw control their lives. "Let me come with you," she said. "No." "Jack." "No." His voice was firm. "You and Grace stay here, where it's safe." "I'm not some—" "I know you're not." He cut her off gently. "I know you're strong. I know you can handle yourself. But this—" He paused, choosing his words. "This is something I need to do, alone." "Why?" "Because Shaw needs to know that you're not alone anymore. that there's someone standing between him and you. Someone he can't scare off. Jack's eyes held hers. Let me do this for you, please. Eleanor wanted to fight, but she saw the look in his eyes, the need to protect, to provide, to prove himself worthy of the trust she'd given him. All right, she said finally. But if you're not back by dark, I'll be back before dark. Promise me. I promise. Jack kissed her forehead. Now go wake Grace. Tell her Papa's going to town and ask if she wants anything. Papa. The word made Eleanor's eyes sting. She went to wake her daughter. Jack was gone for most of the day. Eleanor tried to keep busy. She cleaned, she cooked. She helped Grace practice her letters. She did everything she could to keep her mind off what might be happening in town. It didn't work. Every time she heard a sound outside, a bird, a branch, the settling of snow, she ran to the window. Every time, nothing. Mama. Grace tugged at her sleeve around midday. You're scaring me. Eleanor forced a smile. I'm sorry, baby. I'm just worried about Jack. Jack's strong. He'll be okay. I know. He promised he'd come back, and papas don't break promises. Eleanor's throat tightened. No, they don't. My first papa broke his promise. Grace's voice was matter of fact. He said he'd come home from the mine, but he didn't. Eleanor crouched down, gathering her daughter into her arms. Oh, sweetheart. He didn't mean to break his promise. He wanted to come home more than anything. I know. Grace pulled back, her small face serious. But Jack's different. Jack won't break his promise. How do you know? I just know. Grace shrugged. The same way I knew he was nice when I first saw him. Eleanor stared at her daughter. When had this child become so wise? You're right, she said finally. Jack won't break his promise. She had to believe it, because the alternative was unthinkable. The sun was starting to set when Eleanor heard hoofbeats. She was at the door before she could think. Throwing it open, her heart in her throat, Jack rode into the yard, his horse loaded with supplies. He was whole, unhurt, alive. I told you I'd be back before dark, he said, swinging down from the saddle. Eleanor didn't say anything. She just crossed the distance between them and threw her arms around him. Hey! His arms came around her, holding her tight. Hey, I'm okay. Everything's okay. I was so worried. I know. I'm sorry. He pulled back to look at her face. But it's done. Shaw knows I'm not going anywhere. What happened? Let me get the supplies inside, then I'll tell you everything. They unloaded the horse together, carrying sacks of flour and beans and coffee into the cabin. Grace bounced around them, excited by the abundance, asking 100 questions about town. Did you see the big store, Papa? I did. Did you see the mean man? Jack's jaw tightened slightly. I did. Did you punch him? Grace. Eleanor was horrified, but Jack laughed. No, little one, I didn't punch him. He set down the last sack and turned to face them. But I made sure he understood some things. What things? Eleanor asked. Jack was quiet for a moment. He seemed to be choosing his words carefully. I went to the general store first, he said. Shaw was there like I knew he'd be. He tried to refuse me service, said he didn't sell to drifters. What did you do? Told him I wasn't a drifter anymore. Told him I was staying. Told him I was going to be the man of the Morgan household, and that he'd better get used to seeing my face in his store. Eleanor's breath caught. You said that in front of everyone. In front of everyone. Jack's mouth curved slightly. You should have seen his face. What did he do? Tried to throw me out. Called for Wheeler and Dobbs, his hired muscle. Jack shrugged. They took one look at me and suddenly remembered they had somewhere else to be. They just left. Men like that are brave when they're picking on widows and children. Not so brave when they're facing someone who might actually fight back. Jack's voice hardened. I made it clear that if Shaw ever came near you or Grace again, he'd answer to me. and he just accepted that he didn't have a choice. Jack sat down at the table, and Eleanor saw for the first time how tired he looked. Shaw's power comes from fear. Take away the fear and he's got nothing. Eleanor sank into the chair across from him. But he won't just give up. He's not the type. No, he's not. Jack met her eyes. He'll try something. Push back somehow. Men like him always do. Then what do? We prepare. We build our strength. We make allies. Jack leaned forward. I talked to some folks in town today. Not everyone is happy with Shaw. Some of them remember what this town used to be like before he took over. Who? Ezra Caldwell, for one. Runs the trading post east of town. Lost a leg at Gettysburg, doesn't owe Shaw a thing. He's willing to help. Help how? Credit for starters. He'll sell to you on account, let you pay when you can. Says any enemy of Shaw is a friend of his. Eleanor's eyes widened. He said that. He said a lot of things. Jack's expression softened. You're not as alone as you think, Eleanor. People have been watching what Shaw did to you. Some of them are ashamed they didn't do anything. They're looking for a chance to make it right. But they were scared. They're still scared, but scared people can find courage when someone shows them it's possible. Jack reached across the table and took her hand. That's what we did. What you did. You stood up when everyone else looked away. I collapsed in the mud. You're the one who stood up. We both did. His thumb traced circles on her palm. And now others are starting to stand too. That's how things change, Eleanor. One person at a time. Grace appeared at Jack's elbow. Papa, I'm hungry. Jack laughed, the tension breaking. Then let's eat, little one. I brought something special. He reached into one of the sacks and pulled out a small paper package. Inside were 3 peppermint sticks, red and white, striped perfect. Grace's eyes went huge. Candy, real candy. Real candy. Jack handed her one. But only after dinner, okay? Okay. Grace clutched the peppermint like it was made of gold. Mama, look. Papa brought candy. Eleanor looked at the peppermint stick. Such a small thing. Such a simple luxury, and felt tears prick her eyes. This was what she'd been fighting for. Not the cabin, not the land, but this. These moments, this family. Thank you, she whispered to Jack. He squeezed her hand. We're just getting started. That night, after Grace was asleep with her peppermint stick safely tucked under her pillow, Eleanor and Jack sat by the fire. There's something else, Jack said quietly. Something I didn't want to say in front of Grace. Eleanor's stomach tightened. What? Shaw's not going to let this go. The way he looked at me when I left. Jack shook his head. He's planning something. I could see it in his eyes. What can he do? I don't know. But he's got money connections, men on his payroll. Jack stared into the fire. He could make trouble for us in ways I can't predict. Then we'll face it together. Eleanor. No. She cut him off. You said you were staying. You said we'd build something real. Did you mean it? Of course I meant it. Then stop trying to protect me from the truth. Eleanor's voice was fierce. I've survived Shaw's cruelty for 2 years. I've survived my husband dying. I've survived watching my daughter nearly starve. Whatever he throws at us, I can handle it. Jack looked at her for a long moment. Then he smiled, that rare, genuine smile that transformed his face. You're something else, Eleanor Morgan. Soon to be Eleanor Holloway, if you meant what you said. I meant every word. Jack pulled her close. Every single word. Eleanor leaned into him, feeling his heartbeat against her cheek. When? She asked. When what? When do you want to get married? Jack was quiet for a moment. Tomorrow, if you'd have me. But I reckon you deserve better than that. A proper wedding with a church and witnesses and... I don't need proper. Eleanor pulled back to look at him. I just need you. You've got me. He kissed her forehead. But let's do this right. Let's give Bitter Creek something to remember. Let's show Shaw and everyone else that we're not ashamed, we're not hiding, we're building something real." Eleanor nodded slowly. "All right. A proper wedding. But soon." "Soon," Jack agreed. "As soon as the roads are fully clear, I'll talk to the preacher. And Shaw. Shaw can watch from the back of the church." Jack's voice hardened. "He can watch and know that he lost, that you won, that all his cruelty and scheming and bullying came to nothing." Eleanor thought about that, about standing at the altar with Jack, while Shaw watched helpless, impotent, defeated. It was petty. It was vindictive. It was exactly what she wanted. "I love you," she said. "I don't think I've said it yet, but I do. I love you, Jack Holloway." "I know." Jack's voice was rough with emotion. "I love you too, Eleanor. More than I thought I could love anyone again." They held each other as the fire burned low, as the night grew deep, as the first stars appeared through the gaps in the roof that Jack would fix tomorrow. They didn't know what Shaw was planning. Didn't know what obstacles lay ahead. Didn't know if their happiness would last. But for now, in this moment, they had each other. And that was enough. The next morning brought visitors. Eleanor was washing dishes when she heard horses approaching, multiple horses coming fast. Her heart seized. "Jack!" He was already moving, grabbing his rifle from where it leaned against the wall. "Stay inside," he said. "Keep Grace in the back room." "Jack, do it!" Eleanor grabbed Grace and pulled her toward the small back room, pressing them both against the wall, trying to hear what was happening outside. Voices, men's voices. She couldn't make out the words, but she heard Jack respond calm and steady. Then laughter. She crept to the window and peered out. There were 3 men in the yard, but they weren't Shaw's people. She recognized Ezra Caldwell immediately. The wooden leg was hard to miss, and the other 2 looked like ranchers, weather-beaten and honest. Jack had lowered his rifle. He was talking with them, nodding, even smiling slightly. Eleanor's legs went weak with relief. "Can I come out now, Mama?" Grace asked. "Yes, baby. I think it's okay." They emerged from the cabin together. The men turned to look at them, and Eleanor saw something in their faces she hadn't expected. Respect. "Mrs. Morgan." Ezra Caldwell tipped his hat. "Pleasure to finally meet you properly." "Mr. Caldwell." Eleanor nodded. "Jack told me about your kindness. I'm grateful." "Ain't kindness." Caldwell's voice was gruff. "It's common decency. Something this town's been lacking for too long." One of the other men stepped forward. He was older, silver-haired, with a face like cracked leather. "I'm Samuel Whitmore," he said. "Got a spread about 10 miles west. This here's my boy Daniel." The younger man, maybe 30, with his father's jawline, nodded at her. "We came to talk," Samuel said. "About Shaw. About what's been happening in this town. About what we might do about it." Eleanor looked at Jack. He nodded slightly. "Then you'd better come inside," she said. "I'll put on coffee." They talked for hours. Eleanor learned that Shaw had been tightening his grip on Bitter Creek for years, buying up land, controlling supplies, squeezing out anyone who wouldn't bend to him. The ranchers had been watching, growing angrier, but too scared to act alone. "Man's got the sheriff in his pocket," Samuel said. "Got the bank, too. Anyone who crosses him finds their loans called and their supplies cut off. It's been slow, quiet, but it's been happening." "Then why come to us now?" Eleanor asked. The men exchanged glances. "Because of what Jack did yesterday," Daniel said finally. "Standing up to Shaw in his own store in front of everyone. First time anyone's done that in years." "People are talking," Caldwell added. "Saying maybe it's time to push back. Maybe Shaw ain't as powerful as he thinks." "He's still powerful," Jack said. "He's got money-men connections. We can't fight him head-on." "Maybe not." Samuel leaned forward. "But we can fight him smart. Document what he's done. Build a case. There's a circuit judge comes through every few months, fair man by all accounts. If we can get enough testimony, enough evidence, we might be able to break his hold on this town." Caldwell finished. Eleanor felt something stir in her chest. Hope, yes, but more than that. Purpose. "What do you need from us?" she asked. Samuel looked at her with something like approval. "Your story for starters. The debts he's claimed, the interest he's charged, the offer he made you." His voice hardened on the last words. "That alone might be enough to start an investigation." "I'll tell it," Eleanor said. "All of it. Whatever it takes." Jack reached over and took her hand. "We both will." The men left as the sun was setting, promising to return in a few days with more information, more allies, more plans. Eleanor stood on the porch watching them ride away, Jack's arm around her waist. "This is really happening," she said. "We're really doing this." Scared? Terrified? She looked up at him. "But I'd rather be terrified and fighting than safe and surrendering." Jack pulled her closer. "That's my girl." Behind them, Grace appeared in the doorway. "Mama, Papa." "What's happening?" Eleanor turned and held out her hand. Her daughter ran to her, and she lifted her up, settling her on her hip. "We're making friends, baby," she said. "We're building something." "Building what?" Eleanor looked at Jack. He looked back at her, and in that moment she knew whatever came next, they'd face it together. "A future," she said. "We're building a future." 3 days later, Shaw made his move. Eleanor was alone at the cabin with Grace when she heard the hoofbeats. Jack had ridden to Caldwell's trading post to finalize arrangements for their wedding, just 2 more days now, and wasn't expected back until afternoon. The sound of multiple horses sent ice through her veins. "Grace," she kept her voice calm. "Go to your room, close the door. Don't come out until I say. Mama. Now, baby. Go." Grace ran. Eleanor heard the door close, heard the scrape of something being pushed against it, her daughter barricading herself in smart girl, and moved toward the window. 3 riders in the yard. Shaw in front, his expensive coat ridiculous against the mud. Wheeler and Dobbs behind him, their hands resting on their guns. Eleanor's heart pounded so hard she could hear it in her ears. But she made herself walk to the door. Made herself open it, made herself step onto the porch like she wasn't afraid. "Mr. Shaw." Her voice didn't shake. She was proud of that. "You're on my property." "Mrs. Morgan." Shaw smiled that snake smile. "Or should I say, Mrs. Holloway, I hear congratulations are in order." "What do you want?" "Just a friendly visit." He dismounted, handing his reins to Wheeler. "Heard you've been making friends lately. Caldwell. The Whitmores. Some of my other former customers." "I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't play stupid, Eleanor." Shaw stepped closer, and she forced herself not to retreat. "I know what you're planning. Building a case against me. Gathering testimony. Waiting for the circuit judge." Eleanor's stomach dropped. How did he know who had talked? "It won't work," Shaw continued. "Judge Harmon's a friend of mine. Has been for years. Any case you bring, he'll dismiss it. Any testimony you gather, he'll ignore." "You don't own everyone." "Don't I?" Shaw laughed. "I own this town, Eleanor. Every store, every farm, every person in it, including your precious rancher friends. You think they'll stand by you when I start calling in their debts, when I cut off their supplies, when I make their lives so miserable they'll beg me for mercy? They're not afraid of you." "They should be." Shaw's voice dropped, turning soft and dangerous. "And so should you." He stepped onto the porch. Eleanor held her ground, even though every instinct screamed at her to run. "I made you an offer once," Shaw said. "A generous offer. You threw it in my face. And I'd do it again." "Would you?" He was close now. Close enough that she could smell his tobacco and whiskey breath. "Even knowing what I could do to you, to your daughter, to that drifter you've attached yourself to." "Jack's not a drifter." "He's worse than a drifter." Shaw's eyes glittered. "I did some checking. Jackson Holloway, ex-Confederate, wanted for desertion in Texas. Did you know that? Eleanor's blood ran cold. You're lying. Am I? Shaw reached into his coat and pulled out a folded paper. I've got a telegram right here from the Texas Rangers. They'd be very interested to know where Mr. Holloway is hiding. That war ended 17 years ago. Nobody cares about... The Rangers care. Shaw smiled. Desertion's a serious crime. Could mean prison. Could mean worse. Eleanor's mind raced. Was it true Jack had mentioned fighting in the war, refused to say which side? Could this be why? Could he really be no? She wouldn't believe it. Not without hearing it from Jack himself. Get off my property, she said. I'm not finished. Yes, you are. Eleanor's voice hardened. I don't care what papers you wave around. I don't care what lies you tell. You don't own me, Shaw. You never will. Something ugly flickered across Shaw's face. He grabbed her arm, fingers digging in hard enough to bruise. You stupid woman. You think you can defy me? You think that drifter can protect you? He leaned in close. I could take everything from you. Your land. Your daughter. Your life. All it would take is a word. Let go of me. Or what? Shaw laughed. Your precious Jack isn't here. Nobody's here. It's just you and me, Eleanor. Just like it's always been. Eleanor looked him dead in the eye. Let go. Make me. She did. Her knee came up hard between his legs. Shaw doubled over with a strangled sound, releasing her arm. Before he could recover, she had the rifle from inside the door. Jack had left it, taught her how to use it, and the barrel was pressed against Shaw's forehead. Wheeler Dobbs! Shaw gasped. Get her! Don't move! Eleanor's voice was ice. Either of you. I can put a bullet through his brain before you clear your holsters. The two men froze. You wouldn't... Shaw wheezed. You wouldn't dare. Wouldn't I? Eleanor pressed the barrel harder against his skin. You just threatened my daughter. You just threatened the man I love. Give me one reason not to pull this trigger. Shaw's face had gone pale. For the first time since she'd known him, he looked afraid. This is assault. This is self-defense. You came onto my property. You grabbed me. You threatened my family. Eleanor's finger tightened on the trigger. Any court in the territory would call this justified. I'll destroy you. You'll try. Eleanor stepped back, keeping the rifle trained on him. Now get on your horse and get off my land. And Shaw. She waited until he looked at her. If you ever come near me or my family again, I won't give you a warning. I'll just shoot. Shaw stared at her. She could see him calculating, weighing his options, trying to figure out if she meant it. She did. God help her, she meant every word. This isn't over, he said finally. It is for today. Eleanor gestured with the rifle. Go. Shaw climbed onto his horse, his movements stiff with pain and humiliation. Wheeler and Dobbs followed, neither of them meeting Eleanor's eye. You've made a mistake, Shaw called as he turned his horse. A terrible mistake. You'll regret this. The only thing I regret is not doing it sooner. Shaw rode away. Eleanor stood on the porch with the rifle in her hands until the hoofbeats faded to nothing. Then her legs gave out. She sat down hard on the porch steps, the rifle falling from her shaking hands. Her whole body trembled, the adrenaline draining away, leaving her weak and sick. Mama. Grace's small voice came from the doorway. It's okay, baby. Eleanor's voice shook. It's okay. They're gone. I heard shouting. I heard... Grace's face crumpled. I was so scared. Eleanor gathered her daughter into her arms and held her tight. I know, sweetheart. I was scared too. You were... Grace looked up at her. But you had the gun. You were so brave. Brave doesn't mean not being scared. Eleanor stroked her daughter's hair. Brave means being scared and doing what you have to do anyway. Like Papa. Yes. Eleanor's throat tightened. Like Papa. They sat on the porch together, mother and daughter waiting for Jack to come home. He arrived an hour later, and Eleanor saw immediately that something was wrong. His face was dark, his jaw tight, his whole body radiating tension. I heard, he said before she could speak. Ran into Caldwell on the road. He told me Shaw was heading this way. He dismounted fast, crossing to her. Are you all right? Did he hurt you? I'm fine. We're both fine. I never should have left you alone. I should have. Jack. Eleanor caught his face in her hands, forced him to look at her. I handled it. I handled him. What do you mean? She told him. About Shaw's threats, about the telegram, about the rifle pressed to his forehead, about the warning she'd given. Jack listened in silence. When she finished, his expression was unreadable. You threatened to kill him. I meant it. I know you did. Jack pulled her close, his arms wrapping around her tight. God, Eleanor, I should have been here. You can't be here every moment, and I don't need you to be. She pulled back to look at him. I survived 2 years without you. I can defend myself. I know you can. His voice was rough. That's not He broke off, shaking his head. I can't lose you, either of you. The thought of Shaw touching you, threatening you. He won't do it again. Eleanor's voice was steady. He saw something today, something that scared him. He won't underestimate me again. That's what worries me. Jack's jaw tightened. A man like Shaw, you shame him in front of his men, he won't let that go. He'll come back harder, meaner. Then we'll be ready. Jack was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, He told you about Texas. Eleanor's heart stuttered. Is it true, the desertion charge? It's complicated. Jack, I didn't desert. His voice was hard. I was 17 years old. They conscripted me, put a rifle in my hands, told me to shoot Yankees. I did what I was told for 2 years. Saw things no 17-year-old should see. He paused, his jaw working. Then one day, my unit got orders to burn a farmhouse. Family inside, mother, 3 children. I refused. Eleanor's breath caught. They called it desertion, Jack continued. I called it not murdering children. The war ended before they could court-martial me, but the charge stuck. I've been running from it ever since. Why didn't you tell me? Because I was ashamed. Jack met her eyes. Not of what I did. I'd make the same choice again. But of all the things I did before that, all the orders I followed, all the men I killed. His voice dropped. I'm not a good man, Eleanor. I've done things. Stop. Eleanor grabbed his shirt, pulled him close. Stop it. You were a boy in a war you didn't choose, following orders you didn't understand. And when you finally had a choice, a real choice, you chose mercy over murder. That's not something to be ashamed of. Shaw will use it against us. Let him try. Eleanor's voice was fierce. The war's been over for years. Nobody cares about one Confederate boy who refused to burn a family alive. If anything, that makes you a hero. Not to the Texas Rangers. Then we deal with the Texas Rangers. Eleanor cupped his face. Together. The way we deal with everything. Jack stared at her. Something shifted in his expression, the shame, the fear slowly giving way to something else. Hope. You still want to marry me? His voice was rough. Knowing what I am, what I've done, I know who you are. Eleanor kissed him soft and firm. You're the man who saved my life. You're the man who loves my daughter. You're the man I want to spend the rest of my life with. Everything else is just noise. Jack's arms came around her, crushing her against him. I don't deserve you, he whispered. Too bad. You're stuck with me. He laughed, a broken, beautiful sound, and held her tighter. Behind them, Grace's voice piped up. Does this mean we're still getting married? Eleanor and Jack both turned. Their daughter stood in the doorway, her face anxious. "Yes, baby." Eleanor smiled. "We're still getting married. Even though Papa did bad things in the war." Jack flinched, but Eleanor squeezed his hand. "Papa didn't do bad things," she said. "Papa refused to do bad things, and that's why some people are angry at him. But that doesn't make him wrong. It makes him brave." Grace considered this. "Like you were brave today when you had the gun." "Yes," Jack said quietly. "Exactly like that." Grace nodded satisfied. "Good. I'm glad we're still getting married. I already picked out my dress." She disappeared back inside, and Eleanor and Jack looked at each other. "She's something else," Jack said. "She gets it from me." Jack laughed again, and this time it sounded real. The next day brought more visitors. Samuel Whitmore arrived at noon with his son Daniel and two other ranchers Eleanor didn't recognize. Their faces were grim. "We need to talk," Samuel said. "Shaw's been busy." They gathered inside the cabin. Eleanor made coffee while the men settled around the table. "He's calling in debts," Samuel said. "Everyone who came to your meeting, everyone who talked about standing against him, he's coming after them. Henley's already lost his farm. The Carters are selling their cattle at half price just to make their payments." Eleanor's stomach dropped. "Because of me. Because of Shaw." Samuel's voice was firm. "This is what he does. Anyone who threatens his power, he destroys them. Been doing it for years." "Then maybe we should stop." "No." Jack's voice cut through. "We don't stop. We can't stop. If we back down now, Shaw wins. Not just against us, against everyone." "Easy for you to say." One of the other ranchers, a young man with a scarred face, spoke up. "You've got nothing to lose." "I've got everything to lose." Jack's eyes were hard. "But I know men like Shaw. You give them an inch, they take a mile. You show weakness, they crush you. The only way to beat him is to stand." "Stand with what?" the scarred man demanded. "He's got money, men, the law on his side. He doesn't have the law." This was Daniel speaking for the first time. "He has a corrupt judge. That's not the same thing." "Close enough." "Not if we can prove it." Daniel leaned forward. "I've been thinking. Judge Harmon's been in Shaw's pocket for years, but he's not the only authority in this territory. The federal government's been cracking down on corruption. If we could get word to a federal marshal—" "How?" Samuel asked. "Shaw controls the telegraph office. He controls the mail. Anything we send, he'll intercept. Then we don't send it." Jack's voice was thoughtful. "We deliver it in person." Everyone looked at him. "The territorial capital's 4 days' ride," he continued. "I could make it in 3 if I pushed hard. Get to a federal marshal, tell him what's happening here. Bring back real law, not Shaw's bought and paid for version." "You'd never make it." Samuel shook his head. "Shaw's got men on every road. The moment you left, he'd know." "Not if I went at night, through the mountains. In winter, that's suicide." "Maybe." Jack's jaw tightened. "But it's better than sitting here waiting for Shaw to pick us off one by one." Eleanor grabbed his arm. "Jack, you can't." "I have to." He turned to face her. "Eleanor, we both know this is the only way. Shaw's too powerful to fight head-on. But if I can reach a federal marshal, get real law involved, then Shaw will know we're a threat." Eleanor's mind raced. "He'll come after us while you're gone. He won't," Samuel spoke up. "We'll protect her. Me Daniel Caldwell will take turns watching the cabin. Shaw tries anything, he'll have to go through all of us. He has men. Armed men. So do we." Samuel's voice hardened. "I'm done hiding. Done watching Shaw destroy everyone I know. If this is our chance to fight back, I'm taking it." The other ranchers nodded, even the scarred young man who'd spoken against them earlier. Eleanor looked around the table at these men strangers a week ago allies now. Men who were risking everything because Jack had shown them it was possible to stand. "All right," she said finally, "but I want to know the plan. Every detail. If I'm going to wait here while Jack risks his life, I want to know exactly what we're fighting for. They planned until sunset. Jack would leave at midnight, taking the mountain pass that Shaw's men didn't know about. He'd ride hard for 3 days, reach the territorial capital, find a federal marshal. Meanwhile, the ranchers would spread the word, quietly, gather everyone who'd suffered under Shaw, prepare testimony, collect evidence. When Jack returned with the marshal, they'd have a case ready. If Jack returned. Eleanor pushed that thought away. After the others left, she and Jack stood on the porch watching the stars come out. "I'll come back," he said. "You'd better." "I mean it." He turned to face her. "I've spent 6 years running from everything, from pain, from hope, from the chance of ever feeling anything again. I'm not running anymore. I'm coming back to you and Grace, and we're going to build something real, something lasting. Promise me." "I promise." He kissed her slow and deep. "Wait for me. Always." They went inside. Jack spent an hour with Grace, reading her stories, holding her close, making her laugh. Eleanor watched from the doorway, her heart full and aching. This was what they were fighting for. This moment. This family. At midnight, Jack saddled his horse. 3 days, he said. 4 at the most. I'll be back before you know it. I'll count the hours. He kissed her one last time, fierce and desperate and full of promise, and rode into the darkness. Eleanor stood on the porch until she couldn't hear the hoofbeats anymore. Then she went inside and started preparing. If Shaw came for her, she'd be ready. The first day passed slowly. Samuel came at dawn bringing supplies and news. Shaw had been in town asking questions, his face still bruised from where Eleanor's knee had connected. "He's furious," Samuel reported. "Everyone's talking about what you did. Half the town thinks you're crazy. The other half thinks you're a hero. What do you think?" "I think you're the bravest woman I've ever met." Samuel's voice was gruff. "My late wife would have liked you." Eleanor didn't know what to say to that, so she just nodded. The day crept by. Eleanor cleaned, cooked, played with Grace. She tried not to think about Jack, about the mountain pass, about all the things that could go wrong. She failed. That night she barely slept. Every sound made her jump: the wind, a branch, an animal in the dark. She kept the rifle by her bed and her hand on the grip. The second day was worse. Caldwell came in the morning, his wooden leg tapping against the porch as he walked. "Shaw's been quiet," he reported. "Too quiet. He's planning something." "What kind of something?" "Don't know yet, but I've got people watching his men. The moment they move, we'll know." Eleanor nodded, trying to find comfort in that. She couldn't. That afternoon, Grace asked the question Eleanor had been dreading. "Where's Papa?" "He had to go away for a few days, sweetheart. He'll be back soon." "Why did he have to go?" "To get help. To make sure the bad man can't hurt us anymore." Grace's face scrunched up. "Is it dangerous?" Eleanor wanted to lie. Wanted to say everything was fine, that there was nothing to worry about, that Papa would be home any minute. But she'd promised herself she wouldn't lie to her daughter. Not about the important things. "Yes," she said quietly. "It's dangerous. But Papa is strong and smart, and he loves us very much. He's doing this to keep us safe." "What if he doesn't come back?" Eleanor's heart cracked. "He will." "But what if he doesn't?" Grace's eyes were huge. "My first Papa didn't come back. What if—" "Hey." Eleanor knelt down, took her daughter's hands. "Listen to me. Jack promised he would come back. And he's never broken a promise to you, has he?" Grace shook her head. "Then trust him. Trust us. We're a family now, and families stick together." Grace was quiet for a moment. Then she threw her arms around Eleanor's neck. "I love you, Mama. I love you too, baby. So much." They held each other as the sun set and the third day of waiting began. It was just past noon when Daniel Whitmore came galloping into the yard. Eleanor was hanging laundry, trying to stay busy, trying not to count the hours when she heard the hoofbeats. Her hand went immediately to the rifle propped against the porch. But it was Daniel, his face flushed, his horse lathered with sweat. "Mrs. Morgan!" He practically fell out of the saddle. "You have to come. Now!" "What is it? What's happened?" "It's Shaw." Daniel's voice was urgent. "He's arrested the Whitmore families, my father, my brothers, everyone. He's claiming they conspired to defraud him. He's holding them at the jail." Eleanor's blood ran cold. "He can't do that. He's not the law." "Sheriff Wilson does whatever Shaw tells him." Daniel grabbed her arm. "But that's not the worst part. Shaw's saying if anyone tries to help them, tries to get word to the territorial capital, he'll hang them all for treason." "Treason? That's insane." "He doesn't care. He's making an example." Daniel's eyes were wild. "Mrs. Morgan, my father, he was only trying to help you. If he dies because of this, he won't." Eleanor's voice was steel. "Shaw's not going to hang anyone." "How do you know?" "Because I won't let him." She turned toward the cabin. "Grace, come here, sweetheart." Grace appeared in the doorway. "Mama, we're going into town. Get your coat." "Eleanor," Daniel started. "Mrs. Morgan?" Her voice was firm. "And I'm not hiding while good men rot in jail because they dared to stand up for me." She grabbed the rifle, checked the ammunition, and started toward the barn. "What are you going to do?" Daniel called after her. Eleanor didn't look back. "Whatever I have to." The ride to Bitter Creek took less than an hour, but it felt like forever. Eleanor pushed the old mare as hard as she dared, Grace clinging to her waist, Daniel riding beside them. Her mind raced faster than the horse's hooves, turning over possibilities, calculating risks, searching for any advantage she could find. Shaw had made his move. He'd arrested Samuel and the others, good men, honest men, and was threatening to hang them. For what? For standing up, for refusing to bow, numb. She wouldn't let it happen. She couldn't. "What's your plan?" Daniel shouted over the wind. "Working on it." "That's not a plan." "It's all I've got." They crested the ridge above town, and Eleanor pulled up short. Bitter Creek spread below them, but something was wrong. People crowded the main street, dozens of them, more than Eleanor had ever seen gathered in one place. They were facing the jail, silent and still, like they were waiting for something. "What's happening?" Grace whispered. "I don't know, baby. Stay close to me." They rode down into town. The crowd parted for them, faces turning to watch, some hostile, some curious, some afraid. Eleanor kept her eyes forward, her back straight, her hand near the rifle in its scabbard. The jail was a squat wooden building at the end of the street. Shaw stood on the steps, flanked by Wheeler and Dobbs Sheriff Wilson, hovering behind them like a nervous shadow. And in front of the jail hands, bound, forced to their knees, Samuel Whitmore. His sons, Matthew and Daniel's brother Thomas, Ezra Caldwell, and 3 other ranchers Eleanor recognized from the meeting. 7 men, 7 lives. Shaw saw her coming. His smile was a knife. "Mrs. Morgan?" He spread his arms wide. "So glad you could join us. I was hoping you'd come." Eleanor dismounted, lifting Grace down carefully. "Daniel?" She kept her voice low. "Take Grace. Keep her safe." "But, please." Daniel hesitated, then took Grace's hand. "Come on, little one. Let's find somewhere to watch." "Mama." Grace's voice was scared. "It's okay, baby. Mama's going to fix this." She walked toward the jail, the crowd parting before her. She could feel their eyes, their judgment, their fear. But she kept walking until she stood 10 feet from Shaw, close enough to see the bruise on his face where her knee had connected. "Let them go," her voice carried across the silent street. "I don't think so." Shaw's smile didn't waver. "These men are criminals, conspirators. They plotted to overthrow the legitimate authority of this town." "You're not a legitimate authority. You're a bully with money." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Shaw's smile flickered. "Careful, Mrs. Morgan. You're already in enough trouble." "What trouble? I haven't done anything wrong." "You've harbored a fugitive." Shaw pulled out the familiar telegram. "Jackson Holloway wanted for desertion from the Confederate Army. I have it on good authority that he's been living under your roof, sleeping in your bed." The crowd stirred. Eleanor felt the shift in their mood, curiosity turning to suspicion, sympathy curdling into something darker. "Jack served his country," she said. "He was 17 years old. He refused to burn a family alive. If that's desertion, then every decent man should desert." "The law doesn't care about decency." "Then the law's wrong." More murmurs, louder now. Eleanor saw faces in the crowd, some nodding, some frowning, some uncertain. She pressed on. "Is this what you want?" She turned to address the crowd directly. "Is this the town you want to live in, where a man can be dragged from his home and threatened with hanging for speaking the truth, where a woman can be starved and harassed because she won't sell herself to a rich man?" "She's lying." Shaw's voice rose. "She's a troublemaker, I'm a mother." Eleanor's voice cut through his. "A widow. A woman who came to this town with nothing and tried to build a life. And what did I get? Doors slammed in my face. Credit denied. My daughter going hungry while all of you watched." She pointed at the crowd. "You watched. All of you. You knew what Shaw was doing, and you did nothing." Silence. Shamefaced glances. A woman near the front started crying. "I don't blame you," Eleanor continued. "You were scared. Shaw has power. Shaw has money. Shaw can destroy anyone who crosses him." She paused. "But here's what I've learned. Shaw only has power because we give it to him. Because we're afraid. Because we bow down instead of standing up. That's enough." Shaw stepped forward. "Sheriff, arrest this woman." Wilson didn't move. "Sheriff." "On what charge?" Wilson's voice was thin, uncertain. "Inciting rebellion. Conspiracy. Aiding a fugitive. I don't care, just arrest her." Wilson looked at Eleanor. Looked at the crowd. Looked at Shaw. I don't." "Do your job?" "Maybe." A voice called from the crowd. "Maybe he is." Everyone turned. Martha Jennings pushed forward the old widow who'd secretly helped Eleanor, who'd given her eggs when no one else would. "Maybe doing his job means protecting the innocent," Martha continued, "not arresting mothers for telling the truth." "Stay out of this, you old. Don't you talk to her like that." Another voice. A man this time, Henry Polk the blacksmith, his massive arms crossed over his chest. "Martha's right. This has gone too far. Way too far." Mrs. Hartley, the same woman who'd called Eleanor pathetic outside Shaw's store, stepped forward. "I watched that woman collapse in the mud. Watched her daughter shiver. I did nothing." Her voice cracked. "I'm done doing nothing." More voices joined in. More people stepping forward. The crowd shifting, transforming from passive observers into something else. Something dangerous. Shaw's face went pale. "You're all making a mistake," he said. "A terrible mistake. When you what?" Eleanor stepped closer to him. "What are you going to do? Shaw arrests the whole town. Hang everyone who disagrees with you. If I have to, then you'll have to hang me first." She walked past him, climbed the steps of the jail, and stood beside the kneeling prisoners. "Untie them," she said to Wilson. "I can't," Shaw said. "Shaw doesn't own you." Eleanor's voice was quiet but fierce. "You're the sheriff. These men have committed no crime. Untie them." Wilson looked at Shaw, looked at the crowd, looked at the prisoners. His hands shook as he reached for his keys. "Wilson," Shaw's voice cracked. "If you do this, then what?" Wilson turned to face him. "You'll ruin me, destroy my family. I've got nothing left to lose, Shaw. You took it all years ago." He unlocked the shackles. Samuel Whitmore stood slowly, rubbing his wrists, his eyes meeting Eleanor's. "Mrs. Morgan," he said, "I owe you my life. You owe me nothing. We're all in this together." Shaw was backing away now, Wheeler and Dobbs closing ranks around him. The crowd pressed forward, not attacking, not yet, but watching with eyes that held something Shaw had never seen before: defiance. "This isn't over," Shaw said. "I'll telegraph the territorial governor. I'll have federal troops here within a week. You'll all hang for this, every single one of you." "Go ahead." Eleanor's voice carried clear and strong. "Telegraph whoever you want. Tell them what happened here today. Tell them how a town full of people finally stood up to a tyrant." Shaw's mouth worked, but no words came out. "Go home, Shaw." Samuel Whitmore stepped forward, flanked by his sons. "Go home and pray we're more merciful than you've ever been." Shaw went. He climbed onto his horse, Wheeler and Dobbs following, and rode out of town without looking back. The crowd erupted. People were cheering, crying, hugging each other. Martha Jennings grabbed Eleanor and held her tight. Henry Polk lifted her off her feet in a bear hug. Even Mrs. Hartley, cold, judgmental. Mrs. Hartley took her hands and said, "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Can you ever forgive me?" Eleanor couldn't speak, could barely breathe. The weight of 2 years of suffering, of loneliness, of desperation, it all came crashing down at once, and she found herself crying in the middle of the street, surrounded by people who'd once turned their backs on her. "Mama!" Grace broke free from Daniel and ran to her, throwing her arms around Eleanor's legs. "Mama, you did it! You made them listen!" Eleanor lifted her daughter, held her close. "We did it, baby. All of us together. Is the bad man gone?" "He's gone. Forever." Eleanor looked down the road where Shaw had disappeared. "I don't know," she said honestly. "But if he comes back, we'll be ready." The celebration lasted for hours. Someone produced a fiddle. Someone else brought food. The whole town gathered in the street, dancing and singing and laughing like Eleanor had never seen. She sat on the steps of the general store, Shaw's store, though she suspected that would change soon, watching it all with something like wonder. "Quite a day." Samuel Whitmore settled beside her. "You did something remarkable, Mrs. Morgan." "I just said what needed saying." "That's more than most people do." He was quiet for a moment. "Your man Holloway, he made it through." "I don't know." Eleanor's chest tightened. "He should have reached the capital by now. If everything went well, he'll come back." Samuel's voice was certain. "Man like that with something to come back to, he'll move heaven and earth." "I hope you're right." "I know I am." He patted her shoulder and stood. "Get some rest. Tomorrow's going to be a long day." He was right about that, at least. The next morning, Eleanor woke in Martha Jennings's spare room. The old woman had insisted she stay in town, to the sound of hoofbeats, a lot of hoofbeats. She was on her feet, instantly grabbing for the rifle that was never far from her hands now. "What is it?" Grace asked, sleep fuzzy. "What's happening?" "Stay here, baby." Eleanor ran outside. The street was filling with people, all of them looking toward the eastern road. Eleanor pushed through the crowd until she could see what they were seeing. Riders. A dozen of them. Maybe more. Her heart stopped. Then it started again, pounding so hard she thought it might break her ribs. Because at the front of the riders, dusty and tired, and more beautiful than anything she'd ever seen, Jack. He was alive. He was here. He'd come back. Jack. She was running before she knew it, pushing through people, not caring who saw or what they thought. Jack swung down from his horse and caught her in his arms, lifting her off her feet, holding her so tight she couldn't breathe. "You're here?" she gasped. "You're here. You're—" "Told you I'd come back." His voice was rough. "Told you I never break my promises." "I was so scared." "I know." He set her down, but didn't let go. "I know. I'm sorry. The pass was harder than I thought. Lost my horse on the second day. Had to walk half the way. But you made it." "I made it." He pulled back to look at her, his eyes roaming her face like he was making sure she was real. And I brought help." Eleanor looked past him at the riders. They were dismounting now, men in blue uniforms with badges on their chests. "Federal marshals," Jack said. "4 of them, plus deputies. They want to hear everything about Shaw, about what he's done, about what happened here." "Everything. Everything." Jack's jaw tightened. "Including what he did to you. What he's been doing to this whole town for years." Eleanor's throat closed up. "I don't know if I can—" "You can." Jack took her face in his hands. "You stood up to him. You freed those men. You turned a whole town around with nothing but your voice." His eyes held hers. "You can do this." "Mama?" Grace came barreling through the crowd and launched herself at Jack. "Papa! Papa, you came back!" "Of course I did, little one." Jack scooped her up. "I promised, didn't I?" "I knew you would." Grace hugged his neck tight. "I told Mama. I said you wouldn't break your promise." "Smart girl." Jack kissed her forehead. "Smartest girl I know." Eleanor watched them, her daughter, in the arms of the man she loved, and felt something crack open in her chest. Something that had been frozen for 2 years slowly thawing. Hope. Real hope. The kind that came with a future. One of the marshals approached, a tall man with a silver mustache and sharp eyes. "Mrs. Morgan." He tipped his hat. "I'm Marshal Thomas Webb. Mr. Holloway here tells me you've got quite a story to tell." "I do." "Well then." Webb looked around at the gathered townspeople. "Let's hear it." The next 3 days were a whirlwind. Eleanor told her story. Then Samuel told his. Then Caldwell, the Whitmore brothers, Martha Jennings, Henry Polk. One by one, the people of Bitter Creek came forward and spoke about what Shaw had done to them. The debts he'd inflated. The loans he'd called in. The businesses he'd destroyed. The families he'd ruined. Marshal Webb listened to it all, his face growing darker with each testimony. "This is worse than I thought," he said to Eleanor on the second day. "Shaw's been running this town like a personal fiefdom for years. Fraud, extortion, intimidation, possibly even murder." "Murder?" "He's had 2 wives." Webb's voice was grim. "Both died under mysterious circumstances. I've sent for the records." Eleanor's blood ran cold. "My God. If I'd taken his offer." "You didn't." Jack's arm came around her. "That's what matters." "But if I had—" "You didn't." His voice was firm. "You chose dignity over survival. You chose to fight. And because of that, he's finally going to face justice." On the 3rd day, they arrested Shaw. Eleanor wasn't there for it. Jack had insisted she stay at Martha's with Grace, but she heard about it later. How Shaw had tried to flee, how his own men had refused to help him, how he'd been dragged from his house in his nightshirt, screaming threats that no one heeded anymore. The trial would be held in the territorial capital. Shaw would face charges of fraud, extortion, and conspiracy to commit murder. If convicted, he'd spend the rest of his life in prison. It was over. After 2 years of suffering, of fighting, of refusing to give in, it was finally over. That night, Eleanor and Jack sat on Martha's porch, Grace asleep inside the town, quiet around them. "What now?" Eleanor asked. "Now." Jack took her hand. "Now we get married. Now we build our ranch. Now we raise our daughter and live the life we've earned." Just like that. Just like that. He squeezed her fingers. "Unless you've changed your mind." "Never." Eleanor leaned against him. I can't believe it's real. After everything, it's real." Jack kissed her temple. "I'm real. Grace is real. This—" He gestured at the quiet street, the peaceful town. "This is all real. Shaw's really gone. He's really gone. And the Texas Rangers, the desertion charge." Marshal Webb looked into it. Jack's voice was quiet. "The charges were dropped years ago. A general amnesty after the war. Shaw was bluffing. Eleanor let out a breath she hadn't known she was holding. So we're free. We're free. They sat in silence, watching the stars come out, letting the peace settle around them. Jack? Thank you. For what? For stopping that day, for helping me up, for staying when you could have left. Eleanor's voice caught. For giving me back my life. Jack was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, You saved me too, you know. How? I was dead inside, had been for years, just going through the motions waiting for it to be over. He turned to look at her. You gave me something to live for, something to fight for, something worth staying for. We saved each other. Yeah. His smile was soft. I reckon we did. Eleanor kissed him then under the stars, in front of whoever might be watching. She didn't care anymore. She was done hiding, done being ashamed, done pretending she didn't deserve happiness. Marry me tomorrow, she said against his lips. Tomorrow. Tomorrow. I'm tired of waiting. I've waited long enough. Jack laughed. Tomorrow it is. And it was. The morning of the wedding dawned cold and bright. Eleanor woke in Martha's spare room with Grace curled against her side, her daughter's thin arm thrown across her stomach. For a long moment, she just lay there, listening to Grace breathe, trying to make her heart believe what her mind already knew. Today she was getting married. Today she was starting a new life. Today, everything changed. Mama? Grace stirred, her eyes fluttering open. Is it today? It's today, baby? Grace's face split into a grin so wide it seemed to swallow her whole face. We're getting a papa. We're getting a papa. A real one forever. A real one. Eleanor kissed her daughter's forehead. Forever. Grace scrambled out of bed and started bouncing around the room. I have to get ready. I have to brush my hair. I have to put on my dress. Slow down, sweetheart. We have time. But I want to look pretty for Papa. Eleanor laughed a real laugh, full and free, the kind she'd almost forgotten she knew how to make. You always look pretty. Now come here. Let me help you. Martha appeared in the doorway an hour later, her weathered face soft with emotion. There's something for you, she said. On the porch. Eleanor went to look. A dress lay across the railing ivory silk, with pearl buttons and delicate lace at the collar. It was old, clearly old, but beautiful, the kind of beautiful that came from being treasured. It was mine. Martha's voice was thick. When I married my Samuel 60 years ago, I kept it all this time, had no one to give it to. Eleanor's throat closed up. Martha, I can't. You can and you will. The old woman's eyes glistened. I've watched you fight alone for 2 years, watched you starve and struggle and never give up. You deserve a proper wedding dress. Eleanor picked up the dress with trembling hands. The silk was cool and soft against her fingers, lighter than air. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you so much. Martha pulled her into a hug. Just be happy, child. That's all the thanks I need. The church was packed. Eleanor hadn't expected that. She'd expected empty benches, a handful of witnesses, the quiet ceremony of 2 people who didn't quite belong. Instead, the whole town had come. They filled every pew, crowded along the walls, spilled out into the street. People who'd once turned away from her now craned their necks to see her walk in. People who'd watched her starve now dabbed their eyes with handkerchiefs. Grace went first, scattering flower petals from a basket Martha had given her. She took her job seriously, distributing each petal with careful precision, her small face scrunched in concentration. The congregation chuckled warmly, and Eleanor felt something loosen in her chest. These people, these same people who'd let her suffer, were here now, celebrating, welcoming her into their fold. It wasn't forgiveness exactly, but it was a start. Then she saw Jack. He stood at the altar, clean-shaven, and scrubbed, wearing a suit she'd never seen before. Someone had lent it to him, clearly. It was slightly too big in the shoulders, but he'd never looked more handsome. His eyes found hers across the crowded church, and something passed between them. Recognition. Promise. Love. Eleanor walked toward him. Every step felt like shedding weight. The grief of losing Thomas. The shame of those hungry years. The fear that had lived in her chest for so long, she'd forgotten what it felt like to breathe without it. She let it all go. When she reached the altar, Jack took her hands. His fingers were warm and steady, calloused from work, gentle despite their strength. "Hi," he whispered. "Hi. You look—" He stopped, swallowed. "God, Eleanor, you're beautiful. You clean up pretty good yourself." He laughed soft and low, and she saw his eyes were wet. Reverend Abel Whitmore, young Ernest finally freed from Shaw's shadow, cleared his throat. "Dearly beloved," he began, "we are gathered here today to witness the union of Eleanor Rose Morgan and Jackson James Holloway in holy matrimony." The words washed over Eleanor in waves. Love, honor, cherish, for better, for worse, in sickness and in health. Ancient promises spoken by countless couples before them. Yet somehow, standing here with Jack's hands in hers, they felt new, sacred, real. "Do you, Jackson James Holloway, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife?" "I do." Jack's voice was rough but steady. "And do you, Eleanor Rose Morgan, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband?" "I do." "Then by the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife." Reverend Whitmore smiled. "You may kiss your bride." Jack cupped her face in his hands and kissed her. It wasn't long or passionate, not here, not in front of everyone, but it was tender. True. A promise sealed in breath and touch. The church erupted in cheers. Grace threw herself at them, wrapping her arms around both their legs. "We're a family now. A real family." Jack picked her up, settling her on his hip. "Yeah, little one, we're a real family." Eleanor leaned into them both, her husband and her daughter, and let the joy wash over her. For the first time in longer than she could remember, she felt whole. The celebration afterward was unlike anything Bitter Creek had ever seen. Someone set up tables in the street. Food appeared from everywhere, pies and roasts and fresh bread dishes brought by neighbors who were finally learning to be neighbors again. A fiddle struck up a tune, and couples began to dance. Eleanor moved through the crowd in a daze, accepting congratulations, shaking hands, trying to match names to faces. People she'd never spoken to pulled her into hugs. People who'd actively hurt her now pressed small gifts into her hands, a ribbon, a handkerchief, a jar of preserves. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Hartley said, tears streaming down her face. "I'm so sorry for everything." "I know," Eleanor said. "I know." It wasn't quite forgiveness, but it was something. Samuel Whitmore found her near the refreshment table. "Hell of a day," he said gruffly. "Hell of a week." He laughed. "True enough. Your man's good people, Mrs. Holloway." Mrs. Holloway. The name sent a thrill through her. "He is," she agreed. "The best. He's lucky to have you." Samuel's eyes were serious. "We all are. What you did standing up in front of everyone, refusing to back down." He shook his head. "Took guts. More guts than most men I know. I just did what I had to do. That's what I mean." He clapped her shoulder. "Welcome to Bitter Creek, Mrs. Holloway. For real this time." He walked away, and Eleanor stood there feeling the weight of what he'd said. Welcome. She'd lived here for 4 years, struggled here, nearly died here. And finally she belonged. Jack found her as the sun began to set. "Hey, Mrs. Holloway." "Hey yourself, Mr. Holloway." He pulled her close, his arms wrapping around her waist. "Ready to go home. Home. Their home. Together. More than ready." They collected Grace half asleep from excitement and too many sweets and said their goodbyes. The crowd cheered as they climbed into the wagon, throwing rice and calling out blessings. Eleanor waved until they were out of sight. Then she leaned against Jack Grace, dozing between them, and let out a breath she felt like she'd been holding for years. "We did it," she whispered. "We did. I keep thinking I'm going to wake up, that this is all a dream." "It's not a dream." Jack kissed her temple. "This is real, all of it." They rode in comfortable silence, the wagon creaking the horses' hooves steady on the frozen road. The sun was setting now, painting the snow in shades of orange and gold. Jack. What happens now? Now. He shifted the reins to one hand so he could put his arm around her. Now we go home. We build our life. We raise our daughter. That's it. That's everything. He looked at her, his brown eyes soft in the fading light. That's all I ever wanted, Eleanor. A home. A family. A reason to stop running. You've got that now. I know. His voice was rough. I know I do. Grace stirred between them. Are we home yet? Almost, little one. Almost. I'm tired. I know. Go back to sleep. Papa's got you. Papa. The word rolled off her tongue like it had always been there. Eleanor watched her daughter settle back against Jack, watched his arm come around to hold her steady, and felt her heart overflow. This was her family. Her real family. Built not from blood, but from choice, from courage, from love. The cabin appeared over the ridge, and Eleanor caught her breath. Someone had been there while they were gone. The roof had been fully repaired. The walls had been patched and painted. A new porch had been built sturdy and straight with a rocking chair sitting on it. And hanging over the door a hand-painted sign, Holloway Ranch, Jack. Eleanor's voice was barely a whisper. Did you? Wasn't me. His voice was rough. Must have been Samuel, or the others. But how? Community. Jack pulled the wagon to a stop. That's how. The community you built. Eleanor stared at the cabin, her cabin. Their cabin transformed from a ruin into a home. I didn't build anything, she said. You stood up. Jack turned to face her. You stood up when no one else would. You showed this town what courage looks like. And they finally remembered how to be decent. Because of you. You're the one who... We did it together. He took her hand. That's how it works, Eleanor. That's how it's supposed to work. Nobody survives alone. Nobody builds alone. We need each other. Grace's sleepy voice interrupted them. Can we go inside? I want to see my room. Eleanor laughed, wiping her eyes. Yes, baby. Let's go see your room. They went inside together. The interior had been transformed too. The fireplace had been repaired, a proper fire already burning. The shelves were stocked with food. A new bed dominated one corner big enough for two, and in the back room, a smaller bed had been set up for Grace. It's perfect, Grace breathed. Mama, it's perfect. Eleanor couldn't speak. Could only stand there looking at everything, trying to make her heart believe it. Jack came up behind her, his arms wrapping around her waist. Welcome home, Mrs. Holloway. She turned in his arms and kissed him. This was real, all of it. The home, the family, the future stretching out before them. After years of struggling alone, she was finally home. The months that followed were the happiest of Eleanor's life. Spring came early that year, melting the snow, revealing the rich, dark earth beneath. Jack worked the land with a dedication that bordered on obsession, planting crops, building fences, preparing for the cattle they'd buy once they had money. Eleanor worked beside him when she could, but mostly she tended to Grace, who was thriving now, growing stronger and healthier every day, and to the house, which was becoming more of a home with each passing week. They didn't have much, but they had enough, and they had each other. Mama, look. Grace came running one morning, her hands cupped around something. I found a baby bird. It fell out of its nest. Eleanor looked at the tiny creature, featherless and helpless, its beak opening and closing. Oh, sweetheart, it's very small. Can we keep it? Please, I'll take care of it, I promise. Eleanor looked at Jack, who had come to see what the commotion was about. "It probably won't survive," he said quietly. "Most of them don't." "But we have to try." Grace's eyes were huge. "We can't just let it die." Eleanor saw something in her daughter's face, a fierce determination, a refusal to give up, and recognized it. "All right," she said. "We'll try." They made a nest out of an old basket. Grace fed the bird with an eyedropper drop by drop, hour after hour. She named it Hope. Against all odds, Hope survived. "See?" Grace announced a month later, watching the bird hop around its cage. "I told you we could save it." "You did," Eleanor agreed. "You never gave up." "That's what you taught me." Grace looked up at her mother with those serious green eyes. "You never gave up either, even when everything was bad." Eleanor's throat tightened. "No, baby. I didn't." "Why not?" "Because of you." Eleanor pulled her daughter close. "Because I had you to fight for. And now you have Papa too. And now I have Papa too." Grace hugged her tight. "I love you, Mama." "I love you too, sweetheart." More than anything in the world. Summer brought news. A letter arrived from the territorial capital. Eleanor's hands shook as she opened it. "What is it?" Jack asked. She read it twice before she could speak. "Shaw," she said finally. "He was convicted. All charges. He's going to prison for the rest of his life." Jack was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "How do you feel?" Eleanor thought about it. She'd expected to feel triumphant, vindicated, joyful. Instead, she felt nothing. Just a quiet sense of closure, like a door finally closing on a room she never had to enter again. "I feel free," she said. "Finally completely free." Jack pulled her into his arms. "Good. That's exactly how you should feel." That night, after Grace was asleep, they sat on the porch together, watching the stars come out. "I've been thinking," Jack said. "About what?" "About the future." He took her hand. "About what we're building here. And I want more." His voice was quiet. "More land, more cattle, more—" He stopped, started again. "I want more children, Eleanor, if you want them too." Eleanor's heart stuttered. "Children? I know it's fast. I know we've only been married a few months, but—" He turned to face her. "I lost a son once. I never thought I'd have another chance. But with you?" "Yes." He stopped. "Yes. Yes. I want more children." Eleanor cupped his face in her hands. "Yes, I want to build something bigger. Yes, I want everything, all of it with you." Jack kissed her long and deep. "I love you," he murmured against her lips. "I love you so much it scares me." "I know." She smiled. "I love you too." They sat together as the night deepened around them, planning futures, dreaming dreams, building the life they'd earned. Fall came, and with it a surprise. Eleanor had been feeling strange for weeks, tired, nauseous, emotional. She'd blamed it on the hard work, the changing seasons, the adjustment to her new life, until Martha Jennings stopped by for tea and looked at her with knowing eyes. "How far along are you?" Eleanor blinked. "How far along? Don't play coy with me, child." Martha's face softened. "I've seen that look before. Seen it in my own mirror decades ago." Eleanor's hand went to her stomach. I'm not sure." "You are." Martha smiled. "Trust me. I know." Eleanor sat down heavily. Her mind was spinning. A baby. Another baby. Jack's baby. "Are you happy?" Martha asked. Eleanor looked at her hands, still rough from work, but healing. Looked at the kitchen around her warm, stocked home. "Yes," she said. "I'm happy." She waited until that night to tell Jack. They were in bed, the lamp turned low, Grace asleep in the next room. Eleanor lay in the circle of his arms, listening to his heartbeat, trying to find the words. Jack. I need to tell you something. He shifted, looking down at her. What is it? She took a breath. We're going to have a baby. Silence. Then Jack's arms tightened around her, crushing her against him. A baby, he whispered. Our baby. Yes. Eleanor. His voice cracked. I never thought after Sarah, I know. She pulled back to look at him. His face was wet. I know. A baby. He laughed a broken, beautiful sound. We're having a baby. Are you happy? Happy. He cupped her face in his hands. I'm terrified. I'm overwhelmed. He kissed her. I'm the happiest man alive. Eleanor laughed through her own tears. Good. Because I'm going to need you. This isn't going to be easy. Nothing worth having ever is. Jack pressed his forehead to hers. But we'll do it together. Like we do everything. Together. Eleanor agreed. Always. The baby came in late spring, when the wildflowers were blooming and the world was green and alive. It was a boy. They named him Thomas, after Eleanor's first husband. Jack suggested it himself. He was a good man, Jack said, holding his son for the first time. He deserves to be remembered. Eleanor wept. She couldn't help it. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you for understanding. He gave you grace. Jack's voice was rough. He gave you the strength to survive until I found you. I owe him everything. Grace was enchanted by her baby brother. She spent hours watching him, talking to him, showing him all her treasures. Look, Thomas, she said one afternoon, holding up her bird Hope, now fully grown and free to come and go as she pleased. This is my bird. I saved her, and Mama saved me, and Papa saved Mama, and now we're all saved together. Eleanor watched from the doorway, Thomas sleeping in her arms, Jack standing behind her with his hands on her shoulders. She's got it figured out, Jack murmured. She always did. Eleanor leaned back against him. She knew you were good from the moment she saw you. Smart girl. The smartest. They stood there together, watching their daughter holding their son, letting the moment settle around them. This was their family. Built from broken pieces, held together with love. Years passed. Holloway Ranch grew from a struggling homestead into a thriving operation. They bought cattle, hired hands, expanded their land. The cabin became a house, then a proper ranch house with rooms for everyone. Grace grew tall and strong with her mother's determination and her father's steady eyes. She could ride and rope and shoot better than most men, and she had her pick of suitors, though she turned them all down, too busy with her own dreams to settle for someone else's. Thomas grew into a thoughtful boy with his father's dark hair and his mother's fierce heart. He asked questions constantly about everything and remembered every answer. And 3 years after Thomas came, Charlotte a surprise that wasn't really a surprise. She had Jack's eyes and Eleanor's smile and a personality all her own. The town changed too. With Shaw gone, Bitter Creek transformed. New businesses opened. New families moved in. The people who'd once been afraid learned to trust again, to help each other, to build something together. They never forgot what Eleanor had done, how she'd stood up when no one else would, how she'd shown them that courage was possible. She became a kind of legend, the widow who'd faced down the tyrant, the woman who'd turned a town around with nothing but her voice. Eleanor never thought of herself that way. She'd just done what she had to do, what any mother would do to protect her child. But sometimes late at night, she'd look at everything they'd built and feel a quiet wonder. This life, this family, this home. It had all started with a collapse in the mud. A stranger's hand. A simple question, "Can you stand?" And she'd found out that yes, she could. She could stand, she could fight. She could survive. Not alone, never alone, but with the people who loved her, who stood beside her, who refused to let her fall. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Jack took Eleanor up to the ridge overlooking the ranch. The sun was setting, painting everything in gold. Below them, their land stretched out in every direction, cattle grazing crops, growing children playing in the yard. "Remember when you asked me why I stopped that day?" Jack said. "Why I helped you? You said because I needed help." "That's not the whole truth." He turned to face her. "The truth is, I saw something in you. Something that made me stop running for the first time in years." "What did you see?" "Myself." His voice was rough. "I saw someone who'd lost everything but kept fighting. Someone who refused to give up even when there was nothing left. Someone who—" He stopped, swallowed. "Someone who deserved to be saved." "You saved me," Eleanor whispered. "No." Jack shook his head. "You saved yourself. I just held out my hand. And I took it. Best decision I ever made." Eleanor looked at him. This man who'd appeared out of the snow like a miracle, who'd given her back her life, who'd built something beautiful with her from the wreckage of their pasts. "I love you," she said. "I don't say it enough, but I love you, Jackson Holloway. More than I knew it was possible to love anyone." "I love you too." He pulled her close. "Eleanor Rose Holloway. My wife. My partner. My home." They stood there as the sun set, holding each other, watching their children play in the yard below. Grace was teaching Thomas to rope. Charlotte was chasing chickens, shrieking with laughter. The ranch hands were finishing up for the day, their voices carrying on the evening breeze. It was ordinary. It was beautiful. It was everything. "Happy?" Jack asked. Eleanor thought about the question, thought about everything she'd survived to get here. The hunger, the cold, the cruelty. The moments when she'd wanted to give up, when death seemed easier than one more day of fighting. She thought about standing in the mud outside Shaw's store, her daughter shivering beside her, her body too weak to rise. She thought about a stranger's hand, offered without judgment or expectation. She thought about the choice she'd made to trust, to hope to reach up and take what was offered. And she thought about all the years since, the love she'd found, the family she'd built, the life she'd earned. "Yes," she said, "I'm happy." It was true. After everything, after the loss and the grief and the years of struggling alone, Eleanor Morgan Holloway had found her way home. Not to a place, but to a person. To people. To a family that had chosen her as surely as she had chosen them. And that was the ending she'd earned, the two of them together, watching the sun set over the land they'd built, surrounded by the children they'd raised, held by the love they'd found in the most unlikely of places. A stranger's kindness, a widow's courage, a choice to reach up when everything said to stay down. That was all it took. That was everything.